So Dishonored sat on my hard drive for like 4 months.
Yeah, it sat on mine for like 2 months. I played the intro, but then didn't feel compelled to do anything about it otherwise.
For some reason, this game seriously did not hook me, and it's not like I was under an obligation to finish it in a hurry anyway.
But for some odd reason, we're compelled to do a video about it.
I suppose it was just really eye-opening to see how many little subtleties it takes to get a stealth game right. Like, there's nothing about Dishonored that's particularly broken or amateurishly made. Like, it feels like a really tight, big-budget game. It's just all the subtleties are wrong.
And I mean, being in the vein of Thief, you'd think they would actually get it right, considering how influential that game was for the stealth genre.
Oh yeah, like, you actually had actual Thief devs working on it. Arcane Studios, I believe, has a bunch of ex-Looking Glass employees on it, and they really want to make a Thief game, but apparently couldn't because the IP was with Eidos instead, Squeenix Europe, and now after this game's success, they actually are making a Thief 4, and it's done by the Deus Ex 3 people, so maybe it won't be that bad, but it's just funny to see this game come back in the weirdest place and weirdest way possible.
Yeah, and it really feels like Thief outside of some major factors in the game. Like, adding a character that has superhuman abilities just doesn't flow with the whole idea of a stealth game where you're a frail, weak character that can do nothing.
Dishonored, for those who don't know, is a first-person stealth action-adventure with a very, I would say, strong story influence, but the story isn't really told that well.
Yeah.
But I remember a few months ago I made a video about Metal Gear where I kind of like outlined some of the mechanics that make stealth games work, and one of them involved a very underpowered playable character. And in Dishonored, your player character is almost as overpowered as he can possibly be. It's really funny how it encourages stealth play, but the fun part of the game is a real more loud combat run.
Yeah. I think it would be easy to look past the, lack of strong stealth conventions if there are other parts of the game that were all more interesting. Like, the environment is just kind of bland. It does try to switch up the setting and offer different locales, but I mean, at least outdoors, a lot of things look the same. You get like the same texture, the same looking structures. It's just...
It didn't have to be, though. Like, there's some cool ideas going on in this game's aesthetics by a huge margin. It's this really weird, sort of steampunk-ish setting, and they wrote in some really bizarre lore behind it, but the stuff that actually plays out is just kind of conventional and really kind of boring. It's dark, it's quiet, there's a kind of droning hum theme to the sound design that just puts me right to sleep almost.
Well, it really tries hard to strike that immersion with like a consistent, wet, grimy sensation.
Wet, grimy.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I do.
Just, like, everywhere you look, there's just water, like, trickling, and everything's foggy. I mean, it's supposed to be, Victorian era London, and it does a decent job of it at first, but after a while, it becomes a redundant sight to behold.
I blame the voice acting for some reason. The voice acting in this game is so much more worse than it should be, and usually I wouldn't get hung up about something like that, but the reason why I remember how bored these voice actors sounded is because it's supposed to be a very strongly story-driven game. Mm-hmm. Like, for some reason, a lot of Bethesda games have really boring sounding voice actors, and I wouldn't mind it so much in an open world game like Oblivion or Skyrim that's not quite as story driven, but in a game like Dishonored where everything you do is driven by events in a story that you're supposed to care about and get emotionally invested in, these actors, they just didn't make me care.
I can't believe you're alive. They killed everyone, Corvo.
The Admiral
They killed everyone to cover it all up. Then they took Emily with them and they left. I couldn't deal with his talk of being an honorable military, but Havelock will use Emily as a puppet to his own event.
They had some really high-profile Hollywood screen actors, like Carrie Fisher's in it. I was really excited to see Susan Sarandon play this crazy homicidal old lady, but all of their characters, they come off as so disinterested in their performances, and the characters themselves aren't given the most interesting writing, but especially the voice actors didn't follow up and try to flesh these things out.
Well, they definitely didn't play into their names, because I didn't know that Susan Sarandon or Carrie Fisher were in this game until I was told by somebody else. And I mean, I know you have to figure it out somehow, but it just, like, listening to them, they just sound just like another person reading some script. And
they got Hollywood screen actors who, for first of all, don't have very distinguishable voices, and secondly, aren't actually very experienced voice actors. They're more experienced as screen actors, and it's not the same thing.
But I mean, like you said, they're all just kind of monotonous and lethargic, and it's very apparent. They're all just like, I pooped on a stick.
They also made the very weird choice to have a silent protagonist who they constantly hint is supposed to be like his own self-contained character, but he's really like a camera with little weapons floating underneath it. Like, they pan over his face at one point, and that was weird because you're not ready for it. They show his face on wanted posters, and that's a weird experience because nothing else in the game even like hints that anyone else knows what this guy's face looks like. I mean, you sure as hell don't.
Well, I think it's the developers just expected you to assume details like without any guidance whatsoever. And I mean, it just ends up kind of all getting lost in the mix of the chaos. It's just there and kind of unimportant. They don't draw any special attention to it.
They could have, though. Like, the whole aesthetic theme in general. There's a lot of cool things to look at, a lot of cool places that you go, and cool things you read about. But because the context that they frame the stories that happen in the game is so weak, they really fail to flesh out a lot of the cool visual designs and ideas that they had in mind for this game.
Well, it's even funny, they try to put importance on certain aspects of the game, like the whales. The whales are a major part of this world, and you kind of see them off in the distance, and then at a party you see like some statues of them. But other than that, they're just like, they're not involved as much as they make them appear to be.
Dishonored takes place in a kind of unique fantasy steampunk setting where this city that is very visibly decaying from a plague and inequality and corrupt governments runs off of a whale-based economy. And that shit is crazy, but you don't really do crazy shit in the game.
Yeah.
Like, it's not grounded in its own craziness. I was coming into it really super excited, partially because, and I know this is shallow, I really liked a theme song that they used in one of the trailers.
So it was effective marketing.
And you never actually hear that song in the actual game being utilized to its full extent that you could.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that Dishonored is marketed for stealth gameplay, and overall, the game actually doesn't play out like that. And it tries to encourage you to do it by like having endgame stats where how many kills you have, and you want to get lesser kills, obviously, and how silent you are. But honestly, the combat is way more engaging. You get all these items to kill people in various ways, but then you get like the stealth aspect of it. All you do is like jump everywhere, and you can just like jump out of the guy's line of view. He doesn't have like a vertical peripheral, he only has horizontals, and it just ends up kind of being very simplistic and boring.
Maybe it's simplistic and boring because they didn't choose to flesh out the most rewarding way to play the game. Like, when I was going through it, I was trying to do a real stealthy run, a real pacifist run too, and I found that the game was piss easy and about as fun as a stubbed toe. You have a very overpowered main character who isn't only overpowered in combat, but also in stealth. The only problem is that the little gadgets they give you to be an overpowered combat character are much more higher in volume than the stuff they give you to be a stealth character. Like, you have a teleport move, it's called Blink. You just point at a certain place you want to go within like a 15-foot radius or so of your character. Point and click at that place, your guy zooms over, and you can blink through like literally almost the whole game. So if you want to impose the kind of conditions that you would think would make for the most rewarding, gratifying, difficult, and demanding gameplay, you end up just using this cheap trick to get your way through all of the levels and never actually get to use the stuff that the game is famous for.
I just don't understand. You know, other stealth games like Metal Gear Solid, you get all these items, and each item has a function that is kind of entertaining and rewarding at the same time. Like, every experience is going to be different. And the weapons do kill people in various ways, and you do get abilities, and most of them are geared toward an aggressive play, but they really don't offer much of a experience. Like, every experience feels the same. Each situation plays out exactly the same.
Throughout the whole game, pretty much all I had to do to make it through with the game's equivalent of a high score, which is low chaos, is just wait for guards to either move out of the way or just blink past their way.
Or the distraction grenade that...
Yeah, I used like maybe 3 grenades as distractions, and all of a sudden everyone almost in the whole map would congregate to that one spot. And as hard as I was trying to make the game, it was still super duper easy.
I don't mean to digress off our topic, I'm sorry, but it still bothers me that you have a game that has, you know, detection and like stealth aspects, and like the guys will find you and they become alert, and then suddenly they're just completely back to normal and cool, and like they actually saw you. Like you probably could have walked up to them, punched them in the face, and walked away.
Yeah,
and
that's a stealth game trope.
Okay, whatever. Anyways, let's get into that.
But you know, if you're like doing a European extreme pacifist run of a Metal Gear Solid game, you have to be on top of your shit. You have to use like all of the gadgets they give you at your disposal. And if you're doing that sort of thing in Dishonored, you just blink your way through the game.
But it doesn't matter the difficulty. It always is just simple. It doesn't matter. Like the European difficulty on Metal Gear Solid is awesome. It's rewarding. Like you get caught, it's game over. So when you actually succeed through these missions where you constantly get caught, and you go through a mission without getting caught, you're like, yeah, I'm a badass. Like, and you don't feel like that ever in Dishonored. You just kind of feel like you're running around, clicking on entities, and just blowing their heads up.
If I ever got spot by anyone, I just quick loaded. So I barely even knew what it was like to play the game as a blow up head person.
You're a quick loader exploiter.
I am a quick loader exploiter, and Dishonored is a game that very easily sets itself up for quick save exploitation. So basically what you have here is a game that has its priorities backwards. It encourages you to play stealthily and slaps you on the wrist when you don't. But it also reserves all the most fun tools and fun gameplay for players who are going to go through it as kind of a combat action-y game instead of a stealth game. So in order to get the best ending, you have to deal with the worst gameplay. And that's not a worthy trade-off at all. That's not how this thing should work.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, honestly, they didn't know what they were doing with either aspect of the game. I don't think the combat was any more rewarding as the stealth. They both were kind of lackluster. There was nothing exciting about either.
I would think so. Because this game has such high praise, I seriously think I was playing it wrong.
But then obviously I was playing it wrong too.
Yeah, we might have been playing Dishonored wrong. Disclaimer.
But how? How would we be playing it wrong? Do we need to switch between combat and stealth at times? Did we...
I think that's what you're supposed to do. Like, everyone who's talking about this game's strong points talks about how you're supposed to creatively utilize all these tools they give you at your disposal, but all the tools they give you at the disposal are tools that you use to kill people. So if you don't want to kill people, you're not going to use such tools at your disposal.
Yeah, and I mean, even the characters and dialogues encourage you not to kill people. They like reduce your attention.
Chaos.
Yeah,
Chaos.
they don't want to draw attention to the high profile missions that you're on.
But then I have to ask, like, why is it so easy to play the game wrong?
I guess part of the problem is just like we've been saying this whole video, it's each feature is kind of half-assed and it's not really designed well. And I think like even the story illustrates that. I mean, you get like a very interesting setup, but then as you go along, you don't get any really descriptive details about what's happening or why, and you end up kind of coming out wondering what the point of even playing the game was.
I kept thinking that they were gonna go down some road where the stakes would be higher and your motive would be clearer, and they never do, but there's plenty of room for them to. Like, you constantly see the city just buckle underneath the plague of rats and a very corrupt government structure, and the stuff that you do kind of sort of just prolongs those petty political conflicts instead of saving the city from the plague and stuff. And I don't know if that's like, if they're trying to make some point with that, because it's really bizarre, weird storytelling that isn't clear at all.
Well, honestly, the cast in this game is pretty large in comparison of other games, and it feels very disjointed because they really want to add agency and this huge backstory behind each character, and they try so hard to focus on each one individually, like give them equal time, that you end up not getting much out of either of them. They just are kind of like, you know, you get your story arc of Granny Rags, and then you get the story arc of Pembleton, and you don't really get any like lush backstory because it goes off on different routes.
I could barely even tell that those were arcs. Like, I don't remember a lot of these characters having like a beginning and a middle and an end to their troubles.
Well, I know at least Granny Rags shows up 3 times throughout the whole story, and it's like the beginning, the middle, and the end.
But so much shit happens in between that you might lose track, and the stuff that does happen in her beginning, middle, and end isn't contextualized well and written well. Especially the beginning of Corvo's story himself. Like, the intro to this game is one of the most confused, disjointed, poorly paced things that I ever thought I'd ever encounter.
I think it's probably part of the problem with the setup is that your character is supposed to be this high-ranking official in the government, and you walk in as the character not knowing what the fuck is going on. And I mean, you're supposed to have like a relationship with the queen and the daughter.
Implied relationship.
And then you have the creepy overseer guy that, you know, is very ominous from the get-go, but you don't know your relationship with any of them.
And they could have like spent at least an hour or so setting up these relationships and like really contextualizing the whole revenge plot better. But because they don't, the whole rest of the game feels kind of meaningless. Like, I don't have much of a reason to care about these characters because they didn't give me much of a reason to care about them. It just feels like really weird, bizarre storytelling, but not in a deliberate way. Like, we're clearly not playing Majora's Mask or Spec Ops here. We're playing a game that's just not very good at telling its story.
Yeah, I think it's mostly bizarre just because it tries too hard to develop way too many characters at once and doesn't actually make a cohesive interrelationship between any of them. They're just kind of there, and they kind of know each other, and they're all just partying and drinking at a pub while this guy's going around killing people.
There are 2 halves to this gameplay that don't mesh together. There's a story that doesn't mesh with both halves of the gameplay. There's a visual aesthetic that doesn't mesh with the story.
And
it just
why?
all doesn't mesh.
Why is that though? It's definitely not intentional, but it's also definitely not amateur. It's just, and it's high budget, so
I just think that they got some very talented people to make this game who are just really bored with the project for some reason.
that would make a lot of sense.
And they did something right. Like, the game, it sold enough to start a franchise, supposedly. That's what the latest news said. And it's got high praise and stuff. I mean, it might be us just playing the game wrong, but even if we're playing the game right, like, we might still notice all the weirdness going on with the story and the setting and whatnot.
Even though the game is supposed to be a stealth game, your character is superhuman and can do these crazy physical feats against his attackers, and it really doesn't end up playing out like a stealth game. So I feel like the sequel would have to, you know, actually take out one of those features. Like, either
it would need to be more of one than the other and not try to...
Yeah.
Well, maybe it could strike a balance between being a stealthy game or an action game, like...
Or make the setting where his enemies are totally up to par with his ability.
They could just amp up the difficulty, and that might satisfy both ends of the equation.
Yeah.
So is that how we felt about Dishonored? It was just something that was full of potential and still is full of potential, but might not be realized for a while.
It definitely caught me in the marketing. I mean, I was really excited about the game as well. It seemed very atmospheric and very stealth oriented. It seemed like it was going to be great. Like, the gameplay would have been fun, but it ultimately just left me kind of feeling like, yeah, okay.
It looks
cool.
really, really good in screenshots, and it had a kick-ass theme song, but it doesn't really play well with your fingers, and you never hear that theme song ever again. You know what, though? Complaining so much about Dishonored just really makes me want to play a stealth game that we both enjoy.
Like what?
I don't know. It might be something that we've already covered a lot before on this channel.
That has manly men with sexy voice actors with great crazy-ass storylines.
A game with elements that are actually really impressive by themselves, and they all mesh together really well and
play out like a shitty 70s action movie?
Let's just play Metal Gear Solid, dude.
Okay.
Let's just go off and play Metal Gear Solid. Come on.
What a fear in my heart, but you're so supreme.